Today on Pilot's Discretion, we're joined by Cirrus expert and flight school owner Shane Vande Voort. He talks about the Cirrus accident record, training pilots, and flying open cockpit biplanes. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Hi everyone, I'm John Zimmerman, and thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion from Sporties. Visit sporties.com/podcast for today's show links and access to our archives, where you can listen to every episode of Pilot's Discretion. And as always, we welcome your comments, questions, and guest suggestions. Just send us an email at podcast@sporties.com. Today, I'm joined by Shane Vande Voort, a classic example of a pilot who is involved in all types of aviation. He's an experienced ATP with multiple jet type ratings, so he's comfortable in the flight levels, but he's also an 11-time master flight instructor specializing in both Cirrus and tailwheel airplanes, a fun mix that we're definitely going to talk about. As if that weren't enough, Shane is also a designated pilot examiner, A&PIA mechanic, and flight school owner. Shane, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Thanks for having me, John.
You do a lot of instructing in both Cirrus and tailwheel airplanes, and some people would say that those are at opposite ends of the spectrum. So I want to know, are they really that different, or do they actually share more than we might realize at first?
I think the latter part is true. I think I would say it's possible to show good airmanship in any airplane, no matter how easy it is to fly, no matter how lousy it is to fly. And so I think good stick and rudder skills carry through in every airplane. What you can learn in an old classic taildragger can carry through so well to everything else. Aeronautical decision making is important in any airplane. It just gets more complicated the faster and further you go.
Some pilots will say, well, everybody should learn in a taildragger and then go get in a tricycle airplane. Some people go further and say, oh, everybody should be a glider pilot first and then a tailwheel pilot. That's obviously not practical for most people. But do you think there's an element of truth there, or is that just no longer true? And I can jump right in an SR-20 or SR-22 and do my primary training there.
We've done that. We worked with people from the day one in the Cirrus and had good results. I know some very good pilots who've only flown Cirrus airplanes or only flown that type. I learned to fly in a tricycle gear airplane myself, Cessna 172, like so many people. Had the opportunity to step into taildraggers not long after that. So I always recommend, I think if there's any one thing that helped me in my flying career when I was learning multi-engine or getting into turboprops and, learning to keep it straight as the propellers went back to low pitch at different rates. Very thankful for that early tailwheel experience. So I always tell people, if you have the opportunity to get tailwheel experience, get it as soon as you can. It doesn't have to be ahead of the private. In fact, it may affect the efficiency there, but the sooner the better. And so many pilots now working on a career run into that gap between instrument and commercial where there's, we're adding hours. I think that's a perfect time to add a tailwheel endorsement or some glider flying, whatever it might be.
That's a great time in the pilot's development when it might stick a little more too. You're a little bit more in command of the airplane. You can keep up, and some of the lessons of taildragger flying might hit home there. So I know you've been a Cirrus instructor for over 20 years now. You've seen both the airplane and the pilot community there evolve. I fly a Cirrus a little bit. You've got a lot of time. Tell me about what you think the Cirrus accident record has evolved to, because it started out early on, wasn't great, but recent stats show it's now significantly better than the GA average. So what changed?
I think a lot of effort by a lot of individuals. It would be, there's a whole list of names that would be wonderful for me to rattle off, but the Cirrus community really got together in the name of safety more than anything else. And then Cirrus as a company did. They doubled down and invested. Anytime they saved money on insurance because of a lowered accident rate, they turned around and dumped it right back into training that benefits, me as an instructor out here in the middle of the country. I have access to world-class training materials that I can share with my customers. So, one of the most compelling things at a recent Cirrus conference, if you remove Cirrus aircraft from the overall general aviation accident rate, the accident rate goes up. The Cirrus aircraft is actually lowering the general aviation accident rate, which is not what you would often hear. at the airport, maybe, or in forums. So I think it's a combination of the people who got passionate about the airplane and how you could use it, how capable it was, and knew that very early on knew that safety was going to be a big deal, and then a company who, like any company, is very, any successful company is very sales driven. They didn't let that mute out the safety, the importance of safety, and how they train their pilots at all levels.
It's a great point about the accident rate overall. I'd have to rerun the numbers, but it's possible the small and gentle decline of the GA accident rate over the last 10 years, if you take out Cirrus, it may not be quite as attractive a story. But of course, when we talk about the Cirrus and we talk about the accident record, we've got to talk about the parachute. And again, statistics show it really has had a positive effect on the safety of the fleet, but only if it's used properly. I think there was a transition period there many people have highlighted where the parachute was on the airplane, but the pilots weren't really trained to use it properly, or at least to integrate it into their standard operating procedures. So from your perspective as a Cirrus instructor, what's the right way to use that parachute to reduce risk? Talk to me about that from both a training perspective and just an everyday operational one.
Yeah, I think my own transition to being one on the chute follows the industry. I started flying the airplane in 2002, and no one had pulled the chute yet, and I don't think there was any situation that would have made me the first guy to pull the parachute, right? And unfortunately, and then slowly, the parachute was for other people. It wasn't for me, and it was for absolute last resorts. If it was safer to get out of the airplane than use the parachute, then you'd think about it as an ejection handle. And I keep a parachute handle behind me in my office here, and I keep a caps cover from a repack. I use as a dry erase board to update the number of accidents. So my end of the year numbers, or parachute events, I should say. My end of the year number is 132 saves, total saves, 269 lives saved. And I should put the dogs on there. I think it's 4 dogs. You've probably seen that, but no cats. Nobody's got a cat into a parachute pull yet. But anyway, those numbers, I put them up there because I just love to fly airplanes. There's not many airplanes I don't like to fly. And so I'm not always in a Cirrus. So my mentality has to change if I'm in a Cirrus airplane. How am I going to use the parachute? And when I train a Cirrus customer, when I'm looking at them, I'm looking over them at that caps cover with the numbers on it to remind me this is a significant piece of safety equipment. Most people buy a multi-engine airplane for multi-engine redundancy. Most people buy a jet airplane for capability and turbine reliability. So it's a mistake to get into a Cirrus airplane and not consider the parachute, within its parameters. I don't think we ever expected it to be, statistically as reliable as it is. If you use it above 1,000 feet and below 200 knots, it's 100% no fatality rate. I don't think anybody ever expected the parachute to be that great. And so I think every time you buckle into that airplane, you owe it to yourself to consider that. And I, uh, my own path flying around with my family started out in my uncle's old Bonanza that I was able to buy, a 65 S model Bonanza. One of the greatest days of my life buying a V-tail Bonanza. I had arrived, right? And it got to the point where as I became more aware of um, the parachute numbers, I was flying the Bonanza on nice days with my family and borrowing a Cirrus on on IFR days and at night. And so you believe in the chute, you make it part of every emergency procedure. You discuss it, and every training event we do with Cirrus, one of the items is CAPS scenario, and I think we can't emphasize enough that that thing is there. It works, and it should be part of our risk management.
Yeah, I know lots of pilots in retractable airplanes, myself included, will say gear down multiple times before you come into land, right? You put the wheels down, you confirm they're down, maybe the 500-foot TAWS call out, gear down, maybe just coming up on the threshold, gear down. And I've seen the same thing with Cirrus pilots, that when you get above whatever the altitude is for your specific model, 500 feet, 700 feet, 1,000 feet, they'll say caps available. And you're not planning to use it, just like you're not planning to make a gear up landing, but it's a great habit to verbally remind yourself that you have an extra tool there. And I just think that shows how the technology has made itself into the everyday habits instead of just, like you said, being there as an ejection handle. So obviously, when we talk about Cirrus, another defining feature is the integrated avionics suite. This has been there from almost the very first models and has grown over the years from the Avidyne Integra system to G1000 to the latest Garmin Perspective. How do you introduce that when you're training a pilot new to the airplane? I've heard different schools of thought on this. Some people say we're going to start with all the avionics from the beginning and understand what each piece does. I've heard other people say we're going to start without many of the avionics and basically do the basics and visual flying and then slowly introduce the avionics. What's your approach?
I was the latter initially is, let's learn to fly the airplane just like most of us were and leave the avionics till after, the old days, somebody bought a Bonanza, it was, we'll talk about the autopilot after your instrument check ride, right? Which probably wasn't the best way to do it. So more and more I incorporate avionics earlier. I think Cirrus is one manufacturer and everybody in the business, Avidyne has a great app for their products. Garmin has great courses. So we have all these great tools to teach the avionics earlier. And I think there's when you go to a demonstration performance method of flight instruction, now you have the best demonstrator ever. Better, as an instructor, there's nothing worse than why don't you show me a lazy eight, right? And you haven't done one in a while. Well, that autopilot can demonstrate a fantastic instrument approach. While you're talking about it, you have more time to look for traffic, deal with ATC, and so I think more and more it is a use it all and then fail it down as we get better and better. We take more and more away. And I think that's that integrated using everything and method of operating the airplane that worked very well. And you compare it to the commercial, business aircraft training and airline aircraft training is, you're taught all the systems, how they interact. You're taught all the avionics, how they interact. And then you're taught when things go wrong, reduce one level of automation at a time and be ready for that. So I always tell my customers, don't let that autopilot take you anywhere you couldn't go yourself. But at the end of a long day on a dark, cold night, use everything you have to keep you and your precious passengers as safe as you can.
That's a great philosophy, and particularly the stepping down a level of automation. You hear that advice a lot, but it seems to be more of an airline or a business jet philosophy that hasn't fully trickled down into piston GA, that if things aren't going right or you're not quite sure what the automation is doing, click it down from autopilot to flight director and maybe still use that flight director. If you're not sure, click it down to raw data, maybe leave the yaw damper on. If you're really not sure, just turn it all off and hand fly it. And that concept of sort of a ladder of automation that you can walk up and down. Great philosophy and great mental picture, I think, for pilots who are stepping up into increasingly sophisticated avionics like the Cirrus.
I think we as instructors, I think we're learning that, but I think we could do that better. We maybe gave that advice, but we didn't give them that step down language and understanding and demonstration. So you still see the pilot get loaded up, and the first thing he does is kick the autopilot disconnect button. Well, now it's game on, right? It's all your problem. So stepping it down maybe to a heading and altitude mode or a flight director mode is so much better. And I was fortunate to have mentors, a long time ago in the less sophisticated airplanes that walked me through that. And I definitely try to work through that more with my customers now.
The one area that Cirrus seems to still struggle with, and this is not unique to Cirrus perhaps, but fair number of fender bender type accidents, many of them runway overruns, things like that, that in the end result from poor airspeed control on final or poor crosswind control. And again, this is true across light aircraft, although the Cirrus is a high performance airplane, maybe you see it a little bit more. What should pilots in general and Cirrus pilots in particular do to prevent these? Are there habits or skills to practice or things we should be keeping in mind to prevent those runway overruns or off the side of the runway in a crosswind?
Yeah, I think it boils down to proficiency and discipline, right? So, discipline means I'm going to fly by the numbers within a range. I don't have to be to the tenth of a number, but I got to be close on the numbers. And then proficiency is, you know, realizing that even though we're flying an automated airplane, at a bare minimum, the first few minutes and the last few minutes are stick and rudder, hand flown. And as one of our Cirrus instructors said in an instructor meeting a while back, um, too many of us operate under the illusion that most landings are not crosswind landings, when the reality of it is most landings are crosswind landings. It's 4 knots. We convince ourselves I don't have to use crosswind techniques because it's only 4 knots. Well, that's you're missing a chance to A, do it right, and B, maintain that crosswind proficiency. So one of the courses we teach, the CPPP, which we've renamed many times because it started out as 32 reasons the pattern matters based on 32 landing incidents. No surprise that number was ticking up while we were teaching the course. So I think it's over 147 reasons now. So we changed the name to 8 seconds to success, and I'm not sure where it's at now, but 8 seconds meaning an adequate flare. And if you sit and count, an adequate flare in a Cirrus airplane is going to be close to that 8 seconds, and it's going to seem like a long time to many Cirrus pilots that are used to driving the airplane on, greasing it, and that kind of thing. So I think, an airplane incident is an insurance claim. It's a potential for someone to get hurt. It's a runway that's closed for a while. It's a ruined business trip or vacation. So we tend to go for the big things. I don't want my name in the paper, right? Or now I don't want a GoFundMe named after me. But the reality of it is, I don't want to damage an airplane. It's just going to be a bad part of my career. So um, and what those statistics, some people and some of the folks in the CPPP, uh, Mark Waddell and Chuck Kelly put a lot of effort into looking at fly statistics. And the reality of it is there's no accidents or incidents, no landing mishaps that happen if you have a stabilized approach, right? So looking at all those mishaps, it none of them happened after a stabilized approach. So if we can fly with discipline, if we can maintain proficiency, fly with discipline, fly the numbers, stabilize our approaches. If they're not stabilized, go to the go around, right? And I feel it myself. You bring your family somewhere very cool, and we're looking forward to Bahamas trip this year. If we go to that first airport in the Bahamas and Dad does a go around, my family's going to notice, right? But it's my chance to teach them that not every landing ends in a landing, and ends in a go around. So um, I think there's no guarantees in aviation, but statistically, we have a guarantee if we fly a stabilized approach, we're not going to bend the airplane. And I think we should consider that every time we line up to that runway.
When we're talking about transitioning to a high performance airplane in general, not just a Cirrus, uh, how much does systems knowledge matter? We've talked about stick and rudder and agree with you 100% on discipline and doing it right when it comes to takeoff and landing accidents. In the old days, the first thing you do, and certainly still these days, if you go check out a new turbine airplane, the first thing you're going to do in ground school is sit down for a week and learn about every last system on the airplane. That doesn't seem to happen as much in piston airplanes. Certainly, airplanes are a little simpler, although many of them are still fairly complicated. Do you think that's underrated or overrated these days when you transition into a new airplane?
I think it's underrated yet. I again in the biz jet world, the turbine world, I got the opportunity to learn aircraft systems, and and the culture that it was. The guys that knew the airplane the best were great to fly with because they would help you get home at night, and so that was instilled in me early on. And then as a mechanic, I got my A&P the same time I got my CFI, and so I like systems. I like parts. I'm in my cluttered office here at the moment at the airport, and it's full of junk airplane parts. And yeah, I love to put a part in front of somebody, and if we're talking about an oil temperature issue, I like to grab the Vernatherm off my desk and show them how it works, right? But as a pilot, I think you pick your battles, right? So is it something I can control? Is it something that's going to affect me? So um, you know, what if and troubleshooting a problem. If I have an induction problem, what do I have for controls? Do I have an automatic alternate air? Do I have carburetor heat I want to use? So I think, you don't have to be able to build the airplane. You don't have to be able to draw the electrical system. But I think I see all the time in the airport and business here, we employ a lot of different people, hire young people, and troubleshooting is just a lost skill in life in general. And I think it's so important to a pilot. And systems knowledge is your best tool to be able to troubleshoot a problem. So I always say, as a mechanic, I've definitely got my hands dirty on the road and fixed an airplane when I didn't plan on it to get home. But my A&P background has got me home more nights just being able to work the system, troubleshoot the system, and make it work again, not to get my hands dirty and actually take it apart.
Shane, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to switch topics and start talking about those tail draggers you fly. Hey pilots, let's be honest. Once you pass your check ride, flying isn't just about checklists and maneuvers. It's about making smart decisions and adjusting when things don't go as planned. That's where VFR and IFR mastery from Pilot Workshops come in. Every month, you'll get brand new flying scenarios, one for VFR pilots and one for IFR pilots, designed to challenge your decision-making skills in a safe, risk-free environment. Led by Pilot Workshops' award-winning team of flight instructors, these scenarios focus on practical flying tips and real-world strategies that make you a more confident, more prepared pilot. Whether it's handling tricky weather, navigating unexpected airspace issues, or making tough go, no-go calls, Mastery helps sharpen the skills you actually use in the cockpit. It's more than just reading an article or watching a video. It's a multi-step, interactive experience that even includes a community section where you can talk with other pilots about their decision-making process. I've been a panelist for Mastery, and I can tell you it's one of the most educational and fun experiences of my aviation career. So I invite you to join thousands of other pilots who rely on these expert insights to stay sharp. Sign up for a free trial of VFR or IFR Mastery today at pilotworkshops.com and take your flying to the next level. That's pilotworkshops.com. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion. We are back with Shane Vande Voort, who loves flying taildraggers when he's not flying a jet or a Cirrus. Now, Shane, I know you have a fair amount of time, not just in taildraggers, but even a few open cockpit biplanes. How different is that versus even just a normal taildragger like a Cub or a Champ?
My experience, like everybody else who loved airplanes, wanted to fly an open cockpit airplane and had dreams of that. And at one point in my career, this Myers OTW showed up on the field. We helped with an annual. There were some circumstances. I'd given a couple biennials to a friend in his Myers OTW, which is kind of a rare airplane. So next thing you know, I'm flying that. And, I grew up around airplanes and riding motorcycles. And there's something about you finish a day working in the shop and you get on that motorcycle and you're warm and the cool air and all you don't have to think about anything, or you can think about things. And that decompression and that being in the open air, I always say the open cockpit biplane is the ultimate motorcycle ride. It's the 3-dimensional motorcycle ride. And I'm fortunate to have a partner now, a great partner in a Myers OTW of our own. And he always says it's a sin to fly an open cockpit airplane with an empty seat, and rarely does our airplane leave the ground with an empty seat. Usually it's one of my kids or me and my wife going out for a ride and or sharing it with somebody, most especially. So I've gotten to share the first OTW I had. I kept track because I had this opportunity to fly somebody else's airplane, and I didn't want to just keep it to myself. So I kept a Sporty's altitude reminder thing that I had from way back, a clicker golf counter thing, and I kept that in the cockpit, and I counted up to 50 rides. My oldest son was ride number 1, and my youngest son, I think, was 50 or right in there. And then the airplane went away, went back to be sold by the owner. But the other one I haven't kept track. I just wanted to hold myself accountable. But I've gotten to share it with so many people, so many wonderful evening experiences, and so many times, working the FBO, giving a check ride, not getting an airplane done, and you think, all I want to do is go home and get away from this. And I have this great opportunity to go 300 feet to my rickety old T hangar and pull out this airplane that, if it could talk, built in 1940, built by a guy that was trying to win a contract for training pilots for a war we hadn't entered yet. in Tecumseh, Michigan, and Al Myers. And so it's just such a neat story, such a neat airplane. It's just such a pure flying experience. It's not without effort. Nothing comes easy. Getting an old airplane out and getting it going, but rolling across the pavement out into the grass and taking off is just the purest flying experience there is. And I'm very grateful I've gotten that opportunity and that I've gotten to share it with so many people.
What a great rule to never take off with an empty seat in a biplane or open cockpit airplane. Pretty good rule for a Cessna or Cherokee too, I think, but that's a great one. Well, I know you also wrote about a while back a trip you took in 2003, a memorable trip, it sounds like, with your father. You got to fly the Iowa flag to Kitty Hawk for EAA's 50 Flags to Kitty Hawk program. And you did it in a 1947 Cessna 120. Sounds like an absolute bucket list trip for any pilot of any experience level. What did you learn flying that trip?
It was a great trip. First of all, I'd be remiss. A couple of key people in my life that got me into flying. My dad and my uncle, both pilots, and so I got into working at a little FBO here in my hometown and my home airport. And my dad was a somewhat inactive pilot, and because I took over the FBO at age 22, he got a CFI reinstated, and we got to work together 14 years doing what we love together. He's passed from brain cancer years ago, but I got 14 years with my dad, and I'm very thankful for that. And one of the coolest experiences was that trip. EAA put out a call to members. They're going to deliver these flags to Kitty Hawk. And, um, late at night after a trip or something, I sat down and put my information in, thought I'd never hear anything. And they called and said, "Hey, you're picked. Um, we have this 2-seat airplane. My first airplane I bought when I was 20 years old, bought this Cessna 120 when I was a kid, and my dad had a 140A. My dad and my uncle owned together. And so I was fond of the type. And as soon as I could finagle enough money to sell my motorcycle and buy an airplane, I bought this Cessna 120. And it's still with me. I just can't sell it. It's an heirloom. So, but anyway, dad and I made this trip, and I was running the FBO at the time. He was working full time. So it's like, hey, let's take, 3 or 4 days and go to Kitty Hawk and back, drop this flag off, right? We got a mission. And so in that process, we encountered weather, we encountered high density altitude, we encountered, you know, dad not wanting to pay for Outback Steakhouse, so we went to McDonald's instead. And so just a wonderful trip, and it's such an iconic place. It's a sacred ground um, for every pilot, and then for it to be sacred for me and my dad to arrive there. And just so many memories from one trip. And it was a quick trip. We just went and got the job done. We didn't do a lot of sightseeing. Stopped at some neat airports along the way, and a couple of them I'll bump into. Hamilton, Ohio, near you was an overnight stop, and so I'll jump in there on a corporate trip every now and then. And I think of finishing the day tying down the airplane with my dad there on our way home. So it was a really neat thing to be a part of. The Iowa flag then was on display for a while, so friends and family who went there got to see it. It's in the archives now, but there's just when you do something and you get to be a part of something national, something big. It was just really neat. So that 140, there's open space on the panel, and there's a picture of dad and I holding the cat flag up at Kitty Hawk stuck on the panel, and that'll stay there. So.
What a great trip, and what a great example of how flying with family is really the best. I know you do that still today with your family, as you mentioned. I just think it's the most rewarding thing you can do with the pilot's license to share a trip and go somewhere with family. Hard to describe, but it's a really special feeling. Do you have any rules for that, or best practices, or habits when you're flying with your family? Anything you've learned the hard way over the years?
Our family flying is a little more diverse too, because we do everything from traveling across the country in a Cirrus now mostly to go and flying after work in the Champ or the 120 or the biplane. And I think for me the big thing was I started flying people around in Bonanzas and then on up when I was in my 20s, and so I was used to the pressure of flying important people and the you you get paid to say no, right? The flying is the easy part. And so I was used to external pressures and that kind of stuff. And I taught a lot of people to fly and talked about external pressures and the pressures to make a trip. But when you start flying your family around, I'm kind of the backwards order. I didn't do that till later, and I realized the pressure, that the kids need to be back at school. You have a family event you want to go to, just simply wanting to please your family and making a good experience. And you see so many of these accident reports where good people make bad mistakes because they just can't see past that. So I had to kind of late in life reevaluate my risk management. How am I going to handle that? So uh, it opened my eyes to that, and I think makes me more empathetic to my customers and more time to talk about that on private pilot check rides. So we kind of learned that along the way, and just some amazing experience. And then yeah, that we just have this great opportunity. I work at the airport. Our house is 5 minutes away, and so the family can come out after a day of school, or before a day of school, and we'll pull out an airplane and we'll go fly for 20 minutes. Um, it's just good time with my family, often one by one in the little Taildragger. But it's just been a fantastic part of my life. I always say without the Taildraggers, I'm sure I would have burned out way sooner. And I have this great job. It's not an easy job. It's not a lucrative job, but it's just made me so rich in experiences. And to want to finish a day at work and to want your family to come out rather than to go home to your family, I think is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, somebody once told me there's no such thing as quality time with your family. It's all quality time, even the small moments. And I think that's true with airplanes too. There's no such thing as good time logged and bad time logged. It's all quality time, and that's probably doubly true if it's in an airplane with family. Shane, we always end Pilot's Discretion with our Ready to Copy segment. So I'll throw out some questions on a range of topics, and you fire back with your quick answer. You ready to copy?
Ready to copy.
From your perspective as an examiner, what is the biggest mistake an applicant can make on a check ride?
Ooh, um, there's so many of them, but I would say the best piece of advice I got years ago was on a check ride, don't do any of the 3 Ds. Don't do anything dumb, different, or difficult. And those of us who have been through check rides can understand. You find yourself doing something dumb, but more than anything else, don't do anything different. Don't say, hey, it's check ride. I'll try this method. I'll load the approach differently. Go with what you know.
That's a great way to say it. Excellent advice. How about the other way around? What is one thing an applicant can do that will definitely impress you, that gets off to a good start on a check ride?
I think some applicants come in with, I like their instructor. We care more about the day after the check ride than the check ride itself. So those people that right away out of the blue show you good judgment. And a lot of times you'll see that in the scheduling, in their planning. They'll have a plan A, B, and C. And, hey, I might drive over. If it's foggy in the morning, I'll have my instructor bring the airplane later. I think we're going to check everybody and make sure that they meet a certain aeronautical skill. It's really hard to judge aeronautical decision making and to evaluate it. So a lot of times the people that really exhibit good ADM will show that to you on your first contact with them.
What is a habit you learned in Taildraggers that is useful even in a business jet?
Wow. It has to be using your feet. There's so many things, but it has to be using your feet. And, when the yaw damp fails, you could tell, some of these airplanes, rely heavily on yaw damp for Dutch roll, exemptions and stuff. So, I think using your feet, it makes the passenger experience so much better. It keeps you safe, and that carries over to any airplane you fly.
Yeah, if you've ever sat in the back of a business jet with the yaw damp off on a windy day, it's quite an experience if the pilot's not active on their feet. And what is your favorite tailwheel airplane overall that you've flown?
Oh, that's a tough one. It might be a tie because I just so much love this Myers' OTW, very humble, any man's biplane. It's the Piper Cub of biplanes, and I love it so much. On the other hand, my 1947 Cessna 120, also a very humble airplane. doesn't carry a lot of prestige, but it was my first airplane. I bought it before I owned a house, before I owned anything, and sacrificed a motorcycle for it. And I proposed to my wife in it. Both of my kids got their first airplane rides in it, and I took a kitty hawk with my dad. And now, like anything, I don't fly it enough. So, kind of generally speaking, one of our employees gets checked out on it, and usually a young line guy who's working on the ratings, and they go out and they have all these experiences and they learn in it. So that's kind of the airplane. I got my license in a 172. I really learned to fly in that Cessna 120. So I probably have to go with that. Yeah.
What is more valuable for a typical private pilot, spin training or tailwheel training?
I would say tail wheel, because you can use it every day. Spin training, like any other emergency training, if you never enter a spin, you don't have to know how to recover from one. It's very valuable too. But I think that tail wheel training will help you around every lap of the pattern in any airplane, big or small. So tail wheel training.
What is the best generation of Cirrus SR-22? Is it always the latest, or is there some sweet spot in there?
Um, yeah, I fly around in a G1, and so it's awfully hard not to say that because it's a fantastic airplane for its era. Those of us instructors who fought doors over the years, we really like the G6 doors, and later again because they made them good. So Generation 6 airplane is a great airplane. They're delivering a fantastic. I just Before we jumped on, I stepped out of a G7. Fantastic airplane. You can't go wrong. What amazes me about the Cirrus product is how they got it right from the get go. The shell of that airplane is so similar to the early one, and they just got so many things right. And really, proof is in the pudding. My Cirrus customers really sold me on the airplane, how they used it, and how it changed their lives.
What is one feature you'd like to see added to the SR-22? Pretend economics don't really matter. You could just snap your fingers and add it to the airplane.
Um, Pressurization would be nice. Yeah.
I would echo that, even just a little bit, right? To give us 10,000 feet at 20,000 feet or something. All right, as a mechanic, what is the number one thing an owner can do to help you do your job better?
Um, Accurate squawks, accurate information. I always tell people, if you have a mag drop, take a picture of the tachometer and take a picture where the key is. We lose so much time. I can't tell you how many times we fold the wrong set of plugs because somebody thinks it's the left mag, it's not the right mag. So communication, and I think we're very much helped on that with data now. I'm more excited. I'm geeked out about boroscope inspections and oil analysis. I've been a believer in those for years, but data analysis, I've got a Garmin engine monitor in my Beach Duchess, and this morning I just, instead of doing what I was supposed to do, I spent a bunch of time looking at my shutdown and air start from yesterday. And all these rumors of cooling and what really does happen to an airplane at sub-zero temperatures when we shut it down. How cool does the CHT get and all that stuff? So I think if you don't have it, put in an engine monitor and just give the mechanic the best information you can.
So I got to ask, is shock cooling a myth?
It is.
And you've got the data to back it up now.
Yeah.
What is your favorite flying destination in the upper Midwest?
For us, Kansas City is a great. I try to take all my students at some level to Kansas City downtown airport. Lots of barbecue around. Can't go wrong. If there's a long wait at one place, you go to another place, and it's still a great experience. And you have this from virtually anywhere on that airport. You could take this picture of the airplane you flew in with the downtown buildings, and it's an experience. So if I had to pick one, that's where everybody who flies an airplane should experience something like that.
Yeah, it's a real Chicago MIGS kind of feel there. I feel like in maybe a slightly different way, but it's got that same vibe when you land there, and the buildings are all right there. Great suggestion. All right, you were born and raised in Iowa, as you mentioned. So give us some good Iowa trivia. What can you share with us?
Oh boy, the Wright brothers lived here for a while, lived in Cedar Rapids. The Field of Dreams is a great flyover. If you're flying to Iowa, in eastern Iowa, look down and see the Field of Dreams. I believe it's marked on the sectional chart now, but it's easy enough to find. And excited. My oldest is going to get to play a high school game on the Field of Dreams this year. So it's out there, and Iowa's a great place. It's known to be a flyover state. It's just such a great place to fly and a great place to raise your family. And 8 months of the year, we have pretty good weather too.
I got to go to a game at that Field of Dreams ballpark when my Cincinnati Reds were playing out there a few years ago, and it was absolutely magical. I don't even like the movie that much, but I love baseball, and the setting out there is just phenomenal. So I would absolutely echo that. Absolutely worth seeing, and it's exciting to see what they're doing now with all the kids tournaments they're doing there. It's a great idea.
Yeah, the Field of Dreams. If you go from my home airport to Oshkosh, you fly right over the Field of Dreams. So me and the boys always circle it as part of our Oshkosh event. So.
All right. Our last question is always the same. You have one final flight. We want to know, what are you flying and where are you going?
So I've listened to you ask this, so I've had some time to think about it. I'm a little more prepared than some probably. So it has to be in that Cessna 120 where it all started. And I have this video of years ago, 14 years ago, my dad and my uncle and I flying 3 different airplanes, lease formation, going to a little grass strip where I first saw an airplane, little Sully, Iowa, 2,600 foot strip, 2,300 foot strip. And it's my dad and my uncle and I in different airplanes. My son, my oldest, is in there. He's 2 years old. And everybody talks. So these people that are gone now, I can hear my uncle's voice, I can hear my dad's voice, and we're just having a great time flying together. And at some point, I enter the downwind and I say something about mixture rich, and my little 2-year-old in a squeaky voice says, "We're not rich, are we, Dad?" He hears me say rich. And no matter who owned those airplanes and no matter what we were doing, I can't imagine being any richer than sharing aviation with your family. And I got to do it early in my life with my older mentors. And so if I had one left, it would be a sunset time of the day flight over to Sully, land on the grass strip, get some ice cream, and take my wife with me in the airplane I proposed to her in, and maybe my boys. My oldest is approaching his 16th birthday and has plans to solo. Maybe the 2 boys could be beside us in the Champ or the biplane, and it would just be great.
Shane, thanks for all you do for aviation, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporties, training and equipping pilots worldwide for over 60 years. For more episodes and today's show links, visit sporties.com/podcast. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.